ethical to market condoms to teenagers? Should we be handing them out in places we send our children to for an education? At what point do we as a society recognize the standard for morale in the United States? Many will argue that it's necessary for the health of our population, but at what point do we realize the implications of condoning this behavior? Today I will be arguing that free condoms should not be distributed in our public schools. This audience today is comprised of adults. Many of you may be parents or plan to become one in the future. This specific topic caught my interest, and after doing much research and realizing life's responsibilities as an adult, I felt it imperative to state my side of the view. There are numerous reasons for this argument, but today I'm going to be focusing on three major factors. I believe the distribution of free condoms in our public schools can, 1, negate parental responsibility, 2, it underestimates the maturity and responsibility of our teenagers, and 3, it can encourage sexual activity. The distribution of free condoms in our public schools can negate parental responsibility by raising children by government standards. In June 1995, the U.S. Supreme Court passed the Parental Rights Act. This act declared that parents have the right to the direct upbringing of their children. By handing out more than just education and distributing condoms, this is a message that our government is telling us that we are not doing our job. In an article written by Robert Redford in 2004, it included a survey by Zogby International, and I ask each of you to refer to my handout. This survey was conducted in 2003 with approximately 1,000 parents with children under the age of 18, and they were asked how would they prefer their children to be educated about sexual activity. 75% of parents want their children to be taught about abstinence and contraception. By handing out contraception in our schools, this can undermine exactly what our parents want their children taught. In addition to that, it's also important for us to remember that although there is a separation of church and state, religious practice is allowed and present in many family homes. By handing out free condoms in our schools, this can very well contradict what is being taught at home. We must continue the message that sexual activity is an adult activity and therefore can have consequences. This brings me to my second major point, that distributing free condoms in our public schools underestimates the maturity and responsibility of our teenagers. Adult activities such as drinking, driving, and sex can have serious consequences. And many teenagers are curious. They feel that constant desire need to grow up fast. So if they feel mature and responsible enough to participate in an adult activity such as sex, well, then they should feel comfortable enough to go out and purchase condoms. A school, by definition, is an institution that was built for knowledge, not a store, a hospital, or a free clinic, which are appropriate places to hand out contraception. Without the proper education for our adolescents, they are misusing these condoms. In an article written by Christian Nordquist in 2006, he discussed the misuse of condoms, and he said that adolescents, about 6% of them, had put the condoms on not early enough, while another 6% took them off too early. And what might be even more striking than the misuses of condoms are the reasons why our adolescents choose not to use them. In an article written by RedOrbit.com in 2008, it included a survey of 1,400 students between the ages of 15 and 21 who had unprotected sex in the last 90 days. And the reasons were, it reduced sexual pleasure and their partner would not approve. So how can we even ensure that our adolescents will even use the free condoms that are being handed out? We must continue the message that sexual activity is an adult activity. It can have consequences, and therefore it is important to be mature and responsible enough, as adults are, to participate in such an activity. This brings me to my final and major point, that the distribution of free condoms in our public schools can encourage sexual activity. We all remember what it's like to be teenagers, and peer pressure is ever present today, if not more than when we were kids. The desire to be popular often can exceed the safe, smarter, and mature way of handling a situation. In an article written by Marcelina Hardy in 2009 on statistics and peer pressure, she said that 50% of children between the ages of 12 and 17 have pressure in sex relationships. The distribution of free condoms can create avenues for inappropriate sexual games and additional peer pressure. In an article written by Dan Frosch of the New York Times in September 2009, he talked about sex bracelets. Sex bracelets indicate the level of sexual activity an adolescent is either willing to participate in or has already participated in. So I ask you, what other games can be created out of the distribution of free condoms? Although safer and smarter to encourage contraception use, but not encouraging to abstain, gives the notion that sexual activity is risk-free. Once you eliminate the risk, the activity becomes all that more desirable. If you could dive in the ocean without the risk of drowning or being eaten by a creature, how many of you would freely swim in the ocean without fear? With STDs and teen pregnancies on the rise, it's imperative that we get the proper message out to our teens. The distribution of free condoms not only negates parental rights, underestimates the maturity and responsibility of our teens, or encourages sex, but it also lowers the standards of our society. We must remain and push to keep the bar set high. After all the evidence I have presented today, it is a clear argument that teen pregnancy and STD numbers are high, but not because we didn't hand out free condoms in our public schools. Former President Ronald Reagan, when asked about education's basic purpose, once said, "We are beginning to realize that education at its core is more than just teaching our young the skills that are needed for a job. It is also about passing along to each new generation the values which serve at the cornerstone and foundation of our free democratic society. Faithfulness, loyalty, courage, patriotism, the ability to make the crucial moral distinctions between right and wrong, and the maturity to understand that all that we have achieved in this world comes first from a beneficent and loving God." I thank each of you for taking the time today, and I ask you to go home and think about this on how it affects you and your families. Thank you.